Greetings, ladies and managers, and welcome to this narration of the web series Very Clever Primates, which has 18 parts. This is the first one in that series. A new episode will be released every weekday until we are at the end. And as always, I hope that you enjoy. Chapter 1. My civilization has known only ourselves for tens of thousands of years. We've searched the galaxy far and wide looking for someone, anyone besides ourselves. People to meet, people to talk to, people to let us know that we weren't alone out here. It was one of the biological researchers in my galactic exploration unit. More or less, a crew would be sent to habitable planets, search for any sapient life forms, and if none were found, we would be sent samples of soil, water, and atmosphere. If any microbes were discovered, we were to make as many immune supplements as we could to prevent infection so that my species could colonize the world. It was awful when one was found. My team would spend dozens of cycles to ensure that we had a shield to the planet's native microbes. It was tedious, stressful work full of deadlines, but it was rewarding once the first colonists arrived. I knew sacrificing 15 cycles of my life to ensure my species could thrive in an alien world would be worth it. It gave me purpose. It gave me meaning. However, during one mundane exploration mission, we found a water-based world. More than 70% of the world was covered in water. The planet itself was haunting to see. All of that water and the absurd orbit of its moon had created painful weather patterns. Storms half the size of continents would spawn in the time it would take our ships to refuel on a solar radiation. However, it wasn't the weather patterns on the strange, water-based planet that had my team curious. The planet had satellites. Artificial satellites, something my own species created when we began our journey into the cosmos. We'd found sapient life on one of the most hostile yet habitable planets that we had ever discovered. I can't tell you what it's like to have thousands of people sit stunned in silence as we finally achieved our species' goal. We had found people. We had found, honest-to-God, aliens. We weren't alone. Tens of thousands of years of questioning answered in that instant. My scales shifted to blue almost immediately. I was awestruck. We had a plan for this. We would have to send back communications to our high command to let them know that we had found another species. We had to play it safe. We were more advanced than the species. We could be seen as anything from gods to tyrants wanting to dominate their planet. We couldn't make landfall on their planet without talking to them. There was so much to think about, so much to do. The communications team scrambled to get in touch with someone in high command immediately. But never did I expect that we would be visited. Humans, as we later learned them to be called, were not as patient as we were. We assumed them to be afraid or petrified at the thought of a race hailing from the stars arriving at their doorstep. But when the primitive shuttle came hurtling towards us from the abomination they call a International Space Station, we soon realized that this was not a species that we could scare off. The military personnel on our station readied their weapons, as was protocol in case that they were hostile. We attempted to manipulate our own communications into something, anything that could broadcast to their vastly inferior technologies. Alas, there was nothing that we could do as that shuttle approached. Our ship was roughly a quarter of its size of the moon, and yet they still strode onwards towards us, showing no fear. Our military liked their sheer lack of fear immediately. The warrior caste doesn't impress easily. We were at a loss what to do. The Trinity of Command, a high-ranking official from each of the three castes, warrior, scholar, and diplomat, each argued amongst each other as to what would be the proper course of action. Their scales were quite orange, let me tell you. You could feel their rage in the entire ship. We scholars wanted to skip protocol and make contact as soon as possible. Let them know that we weren't here to cause trouble. The diplomats argued with us, but said that we needed to bide our time as to not cause a panic in their people's government. The warriors, as was common, simply said that we needed to wait for orders from high command. Boring, if you ask me. We argued so much with each other that when the humans finally, for lack of a better phrase, knocked at our door, we were stunned into silence. Those crafty young creatures knew exactly where the rear cargo bay was on our ship. I still remember the laughter as we saw a human literally tied to his own vessel in a haphazard pillar of deep spacesuit, pounding at the cargo hold bay in futility with a gloved hand. The physical structure, upon first glance, immediately matched our own. 4 extremities, bipedal, digits in each extremity. It was a shock to see how close we resembled each other. I'm fairly certain that the human, hilariously pounding away at our ship trying to get it open, was enough for the entire crew to relent and open the cargo hold for the humans. All of our hearts stopping in unison as their vessel moved into our cargo hold. The humans didn't account for the artificial gravity and atmosphere, and their vessel collapsed upon entry, causing minor exterior damage to their ship with a few flame sparks due to the oxygen-rich environment. I still laugh about how dumbstruck the humans were at first. Such primitive, but interesting people. The first to meet the humans were the warrior class, plasma rifles at the ready in case they attempted combat. It was clear within minutes, however, when one looked around, making cooing sounds from behind the radiation shielding helmet, that they meant no harm. 2 more humans wearing similar suits exited the damaged ship. They stared at our military cars for what seemed like an eternity. The rest of the crew were watching on monitors, wondering how they would play this out. One of the humans collapsed, causing quite a bit of concern amongst our ship's crew. The human shook and made ghastly sounds from behind her helmet. There was a key difference between our species that took some getting used to. Humans were sexually dimorphic. The other human who exited with her grabbed onto her fallen form, holding her tightly against her own form, making more of those cooing sounds, albeit in a far more muted tone. It didn't take a genius to understand what was happening. Emotion overcame the alien, and their reaction was far more physical to extreme emotion than simply changing the color of their scales, like ours was. Diplomats were next to arrive, along with the select members of the biological research team. I was chosen to join them, having been the most senior of my team. I could barely contain my excitement. If my scales were any more green, I would have glowed. Yet, I needed to focus. I needed to take a deep breath and relax. I slicked back the quills of my head in an attempt to look at least somewhat presentable when we would first meet these aliens, as I placed a mask over my mouth to prevent contamination. I wasn't going to go looking like an eccentric, lunatic scholar that just got done creating a monster. When we arrived in the cargo bay, however, the soldiers had already disarmed themselves. It was clear that these first arrivals meant no harm. Good, I thought. It'd make my job easier. I needed to collect samples of their tissue. They'd likely have many immunities that native bacteria and microbes of their homeworld, and getting those immunities from the source would make cycles worth of work last mere half orbits. Thank the gods. I took out a phylactery, a device that keeps fresh samples of alien biological material from degrading, out of my lab coat and looked towards the human that had pounded on our cargo bay door, the very thought of which made it hard to control the fluctuations in color indicating amusement. When I looked over the space-suited alien, it dawned on me that I wasn't sure how to communicate with him, that I needed to remove some of the suit of his to collect a tissue sample. Hells, I didn't even know how to communicate with him at all. Was I just to make absurd gestures in the hopes that he understood? The human gazed at me and spotted my research coat and the device in my hand. He said something that I would later learn was "Doctor" when he saw the coat. Clever primitives. It was close to a match to what my actual position was. As it turned out, wearing long-sleeved, body-covering protective clothing when working with potentially biohazardous material was a universal constant in the scientific community. I was fortunate enough that these humans, these astronauts, were scholars of their own species, intellectuals, the lot of them. Humans still amaze me with how quick they pick up on intentions. Despite my lack of understanding on how to request a tissue sample, he knew exactly what I wanted to do before I even had to explain it to him. It was shocking to see him start to take off his parts of his sleeve and the suit to expose his flesh. It was the color and bleached sand, faint brown hairs growing from the follicles on his arms suggesting the species' evolutionary origin. While my ancestors possessed scales, their relatives must have possessed fur. Neat. I stuck the end of my phylactery in the alien's flesh and pressed the extraction button. I was immediately stunned, however, when he didn't even flinch when the process started. A sterile needle rapidly descended, gathering fats, blood, and skin samples, and retreated back into the tube of the phylactery. He took a brief inhale of air out from his helmet, and when he felt the needle descend, the alien, possessing enough intellect to realize that maybe breathing in the species' atmosphere wasn't the greatest idea. We'd later find out that Earth and Valhalla, our homeworld, shared a very similar atmospheric composition. But at that moment of first contact, we both decided to play it safe, despite our mutual excitement. I digress. I immediately placed the phylactery and the biohazardous material and safety bag that I brought along. The human didn't even seem to notice the extraction, as I said, despite red ichor that was his viscous blood leaking from the penetrated flesh. It coagulated faster than even most hardy of our species could ever manage. A high pain tolerance and a quick to regenerate. The species was growing more fascinating by the minute. I had work to do, unfortunately, so I could not stay to examine the new species further. I had antibodies to create. I didn't get to hear the breakthrough in communications, but what the humans conveyed to us as both offhanded drawings and attempted communications in strange tongues. We managed to understand one thing that shook us to the core. It was a warning. If we went to Earth, humans would attack us. I have learned that humans are very good at knowing what people are going to do before they do it, especially their own kind. When we finally got approval to make first contact on their homeworld after the antibodies were completed, being attacked is the only way to describe humanity's reaction. End of chapter. This is a special thank you to the one, the only, the legendary Eric Hino, who has become the only Tier 6 patron. I just want to thank the T5 patrons and channel members. Bob the Dragon, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Australia the Dreamer, Tryagain95, Fudigiol, Meridian117, Alithia, Jordan Bucksborn, Angry Marine, Albarden Gusta, and Barkey. Thank you very much. And that, my friends, concludes this video. I hope that you enjoyed. There are links down below, both to support this channel and for the author of this fiction. Anyways, I hope you all have a fantastic one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.